How are you guys doing today?
Great. Amazing. We're happy to get this movie out in front of people's eyes.
I am definitely curious. No one who will be watching this interview will have seen the movie yet. So, Eamon, do you mind actually starting with what is the film about for people that aren't familiar?
Asking for it's about a gang of vigilante femmes who travel across the South, exacting revenge in places where the system has fucked over people in various different marginalized communities. And that's it.
I definitely think it's a little bit more than that. One of the things, listen, I have a lot I want to ask about, but I'm curious, what was it about the script and the project that got you involved? I'm specifically talking about for Vanessa and Alexandra.
I mean, I'm all about seeing strong women. We need more strong women in films. And this is a group of the ultimate badasses who are leaning into these things that may seem controversial and like really pushing the boundaries and saying where that line is between uncomfortability and comfortability. And I feel like the entire time we're just leaning into these topics, not glazing over them. And I think it's really important, and it's really magical to see what comes out of that.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things about this movie is the fact that it is female leading, you know? I think a lot of the time with these types of movies, you see the women getting saved by a man. And in this situation, women are saving each other. Girls for girls, man. And I think that that's something that we all need to see, especially in film.
Eamon, something that really impressed me about the film was your editing technique. It's very, it's not following the conventional narrative, like the way that most movies are edited. It's very exciting. You have photographs mixed into footage. And can you sort of talk about, I can only imagine how long this edit took. So can you sort of talk about the editing of this movie? Because to me, it might have taken 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that far off. We shot this movie right before COVID happened, and there were a number of obstacles that came into play having to do with that. And there were certain obstacles that we hit because we couldn't go reshoot things. We couldn't get some of the things that we planned to kind of go back to Oklahoma and pick some stuff up. So we had to try to figure out, how do we make this thing that is currently a problem, not just how do we solve that, but how do we, try to make that something that's going to bring another new element to the movie, something that will bring, exciting elements that weren't there for. And so there was a lot of that. A lot of the problem solving is stuff that I feel like actually really made the movie even more interesting, and brought some of those less traditional elements. I've always loved, kind of like exploitation movies and stuff like that with some, with elements and stuff like that. And one of the things I would say is a goal with this movie was to try to take the exploitation out of an exploitation movie. So, I hope that that's where we landed to a certain extent.
I can only imagine for the actors in something like this, I can only imagine what it's like watching it for the first time, because on set, you can't see what the vision actually is going to be with especially this editing technique. Can you sort of talk about, for the two of you, have you seen the finished film?
I haven't seen the latest cut.
Yeah, I hear
It's most,
okay.
95%.
Okay, we saw 95%.
Yeah.
It's that extra 5% that I think is going to be really exciting to see.
I'm excited for you guys.
Well, can you sort of talk about those seeing it for the first time and how it compared to what you maybe thought going in versus, the finished film?
The pictures definitely add a whole other element. We had an amazing photographer on set with us the entire time, just snapping away certain moments. She'd take us and be like, stand over here, and we'd get some shots. And I think that like the energy and the tone that we kind of set in our workspace was very much the essence of the film. Like, we were a bunch of strong, empowered women who were vibing off of each other and working off of each other and like bringing our own things to the table, that it really felt extremely collaborative. And I feel like the soul of what we did is in the movie.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that there were moments in which we were like, oh, wouldn't it be really cool if? And so when you sit in the edit and you see it like come to life on screen, you're just kind of like, oh, that worked. Oh, that was actually way cooler than we thought it was.
Yeah.
You know, like took it to the next level.
How hard was it for all three of you to not spend all day when David Patrick Kelly was on set just geeking out about the Warriors and other films like that?
I was very, very excited, honestly. I didn't realize that was who was going to play that role until he stepped on set, honestly. And yeah, I really like that. And he's like such a cool guy. He's an older guy now, but he was like, we're in 20-degree weather in the middle of an oil field with like 75-mile-an-hour winds, and he's just doing like fingertip push-ups in between takes and like teaching people how to play the fiddle. It's like it was I don't know.
Yeah.
You can't wrap your head around it, or I couldn't.
He was so cool, and like kind of being able to do stunts and wrestle him to the ground and be a little rough with him. After they called cut, I'd be like, hey, you know, I'd reach to kind of give him a hand and he would be like, I got it. And he'd just spring right back up. And I was like, oh my goodness, this guy is still a gangster.
I want to be you when I grow up.
Yeah, seriously.
I would have pulled a Chris Farley on set and just, been like, remember that time? But anyway, Vanessa, you have a very interesting look in this film. And I'm curious if you ever took it out to like a coffee shop and enjoyed being unrecognizable.
We rocked our looks all throughout town because it was a very tiny town that we filmed in. So when we were waiting what would normally be on set after hair and makeup and in wardrobe, there was a bar across the street and we knew everyone who worked there, and there'd be karaoke nights. So we would do karaoke while waiting to go on set in our full wardrobe and hair and makeup and have the most splendid time. But also it was a tiny, tiny town. Like, people didn't bother us. They loved having us. And the town actually like wrote an article in their newspaper about how we were not the standard Hollywood types. And we were just so happy that we left a really good impression with them.
Yeah, it was so much fun being in our costume and wardrobe. And there were moments where V and I would like do karaoke as our characters and like act as our characters. And it was a lot of fun. I think it just dove us deeper into our characters in like some really cool ways.
So like my favorite memory of like walking through town, I think, is when I first met Alex and we were like, let's go get some food. There's like one spot in town and they went last night. So, but we were walking and it's my first time seeing Alex and she's just got this little switchblade. It's a little practice switchblade, but she's just walking through the streets, like swinging around her switchblade. And I was like, damn, this bitch is badass.
It was cool. We had to like keep telling people like, oh, it's dulled. Like I'm not really out here trying to fight people. But I wanted to be good at all the tricks because my character was, so I was just be flipping it around. People would be like, oh my God.
You got really good at that.
Thank you.
That was actually something I was going to address, that it looked like you had been practicing.
Oh yeah.
She had.
Oh yeah.
Right.
All day, every day. I was flipping the switchblade around because my character knew exactly what she was doing and her weapon of choice was a switchblade. So for me, I was like, you better know this butterfly knife like the back of your hand.
I am curious. Listen, you guys, you have a great cast, but you are obviously making this on a tight schedule and a tight budget because it's an indie movie. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges of trying to get everything that you wanted to get with the time and money that you had?
It was very, very tricky. But it was one of those instances where the obstacles are only options to take them in stride and figure out how to try to turn that around into something that would be really great. And like a location isn't the way that, we can't find a certain kind of location. So how do we adjust this part of the movie? And all the places where we did that, where we were like, this is initially a problem, something, all that stuff ended up being great. Also, it was very, very helpful, especially as a first-time director, but like having these guys, having Kiersey, having people who have been, not just have been through it before, but like champions among mere mortals. Like and the amount of help and generosity and support that these guys gave is like, I am endlessly thankful and grateful. And never, ever would have been able to do this. I learned so much from you guys. It means a lot to me, all of the help. And that was how we got it done, was everybody pitching in and people, going above and beyond. I'm very thankful.
I think that Ezra is very charismatic in all of his movies, but especially this one. And you have an interesting aesthetic at the beginning of the film with Ezra almost existing in like a YouTube-esque world with like social media. And then you transition to almost like a movie point of view when you're with Kiersey. So can you sort of talk about the aesthetic choice of doing that, especially at the beginning, and also putting Ezra front and center as the leader of this alt-right movement?
There were two things I would say. One is that was definitely another one of those instances in which like we're not going to be able to shoot certain things, we're not going to be able to do certain things. How do we simplify what we're trying to do and make it all work? And so doing kind of, lo-fi YouTube stuff, we don't have to assemble a full crew and stuff like that. That was very helpful. And a lot of that stuff was shot after our principal photography. And then originally the plan was to not introduce that character or any of those elements of the movie until much later. I really did want, I wanted the story to be focused on the female characters and really for us to get to know them and build that world. And I had everyone who watched it was having the same exact problem, which was just like, I have no idea who the bad guys are who we're fighting. So that was something that we were trying to address. And that was sort of how that, and we were starting to use the photos and stuff. So that was just when those elements came into play. Yeah,
the magic of editing. It's amazing what you can learn, from test screens and stuff like that, or from friends and family screens. Can you guys sort of talk about one of the things that I really enjoyed about this movie also is it's told from the point of view of a female of color. It's not just a bunch of white people encountering or trying to solve this.
There was an earlier iteration of the movie. I was already pretty overwhelmed of like trying to take on really including telling a story from a number of perspectives that are very different from my personal one. And there was an earlier iteration of this script where I was so nervous about that I didn't want to take on also the challenge of like, well, now I'm going to try to speak for not just women, not just people who have personally experienced sexual trauma, but also people of color. And it was mainly a much more white-centered story. But as I was doing the research to try to write that movie, it became so apparent so quickly that if I was doing that, I would be doing, I would let my fear create a drastic disservice to, to trying to tell this story authentically and genuinely, and the statistics even of just of the fact that women of color are, so heavily, kind of the statistics of how women of color are affected by sexual violence. It became immediately very clear that if I didn't address that and didn't take that into account, I would be there was no point to do any of this. And that in fact, I would be, kind of doing everyone a disservice. And so I went back to the drawing board and it was very difficult. But again, I got a lot of help from people who, and not just these guys, but also throughout the whole writing process, really trying to talk to a lot of different people with different relationships to race and gender and violence and sexuality and stuff like that. And just really try to make sure that whatever's going on page and ultimately on screen is genuine, is, authentic and not.
I thought you did a great job with that. Vanessa and Alexandra, could you sort of talk about how you got ready for this role? And if you felt any sort of added responsibility playing these kinds of characters?
Well, to kind of go back to your previous question with Eamon, I think that it's really important for white filmmakers to put women and women of color in the forefront of their films, especially in today's day and age. I think that sets the bar and further pushes the narrative that our lives matter and that our stories are important and specific. And I think that is where TV and film is headed. And so I applaud Eamon and our producers for making sure that narrative is continued throughout. When it comes to preparing for these roles, like I said, I was constantly using my switchblade. I was constantly trying to come up with different means of being these characters. And I was lucky enough to have fellow actors that cared as much about their character development as I did. And we're coming up with walks, and we're coming up with handshakes, and we're coming up with all of the different nitty-gritty things that I think make these characters so special and individual to our own specific choices. And that's kind of what moves that needle forward when it comes to character building, is taking note of every little thing and making a specific choice and running with it.
I think a big thing for me was my wardrobe. I feel like as soon as I put my fit on, I was like, here she is. The way I walked was different, and then the makeup, and like we created like a whole thing with all these little tattoos all over, and I would just look in the mirror and I wouldn't see me. I would see this new person, and I would look at this group of women that I just adore and respect and love, and see what they're bringing to the table. And I feel like it was just a very energy flowing, safe space.
I actually have an individual question for each of you guys, if you don't mind. For Eamon, I believe you are a Star Wars fan, or am I mistaken?
No, you're very much so.
So I'm definitely curious for you, if you don't mind, can you please share your top 3 Star Wars films and your thoughts on Episode 9?
Original trilogy. That's it. Everything outside of that is, sus. I mean, I kind of like 7, but yeah, I mean, in no particular order. Probably Empire Strikes Back, and then New Hope and Return of the Jedi. But those are the only 3 that we're really talking about. 9 was.
Got it. Because I go.
Terrible.
I go back and forth between Empire or Star Wars being the best one, depending on the day. I am incredibly excited for Lin's directorial debut, Tick, Tick, Boom. You are both a part of it. And I would really love to hear what it was like being part of that project and working with Lin on his directorial debut.
We started right before COVID. We were in rehearsals every day, dancing, singing, just being put through the whole musical theater works, which I personally, we both love it. We love it. We live for that. That's like playtime. And then we started principal photography, and I think got only a couple days in and had to shut down the entire thing. And then we picked it back up in September, and we had to go back into rehearsals because it had been months, and picked it up from there. But it was challenging because of COVID. It was the first production we had done since the lockdown. Rules were very restrictive for cast and crew, for everyone involved. But kind of made everyone have to go the extra mile in order to be there. But Lin, being the shining light that he is, brought such an energy of joy and playfulness and just excitement, because he loves Jonathan Larson and he loves Tick, Tick, Boom, and he's been dreaming about this for as long as he can remember. So the fact that he got to do it, that radiates. That's a whole other energy. And for us to be there with him, we all have our own connections, I think, with Jonathan Larson, and it just felt like there were moments of magic. And he is a big reason why that was.
Yeah, it was so much fun working with Lin. And the second what Vanessa said, it was like this childlike energy of excitement, and everyone was really happy to be there. And also it was a bunch of musical theater nerds. So it was like, we do this thing, and it was really cool that Lin did this thing where like we like to sing whatever we're doing. So it's like sitting at a table, and then we create like an entire song to it. But it was COVID, so we weren't necessarily allowed to sing on set unless we were filming. And there were COVID officers who would come over and like tell us, hey, you got to walk this way, or don't forget your mask. And we're like all getting ready and like walking on the set, and Lin's like walking on the set. And then a COVID officer would come and be like, excuse me, Mr. Miranda, you're not allowed to sing on set. And I felt so bad for that guy, because I was like, dang, you got to tell Lin-Manuel Miranda not to sing. That has to be the hardest job.
But it was sad, because I feel like because we were a bunch of theater nerds, like if we could have been filming not during COVID, oh my gosh, the stuff that would have been happening in between takes and setups, like, then we couldn't explore that because we weren't allowed to sing unless the cameras were rolling. But we made the best of it, and we're so proud, excited because it's a really special film.
Yeah.
Just like this one. Yeah.
Listen, I
With Lin-Manuel.
It's great.
listen. Congrats on this film specifically. I hope it's a huge premiere and that gets sold, the whole thing. And obviously, I can't wait for Tick Tick Boom as well. Good. Have a fantastic time in New York.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.